to introduce myself, my name is Blake Wills. I'm the residential sales rep for Lutron Electronics here in South Florida. So I manage Vero Beach down to the Key West area. I work with our Orion team, which is our de facto sales team here in South Florida, and we work with all of our local dealers. So Jeff being one of them. I can help you with any projects you have as far as lighting control, shades, automation, anything you need as far as Lutron goes. Feel free to reach out. I'll make sure to give Jeff my contact info to pass out to everyone. And I'm here joined with Deb, who I work with closely with all of our dealers here in the area. And I'll let her introduce herself. She'll do it a lot better than me.
Hi, I'm Deb Giarratana. As Blake said, I work for Orion Integrated Systems, and we are the local manufacturer's rep for residential systems for Lutron. And I've been around for about 5 years and working with Jeff. Actually, it's going to be 6 years in September. So I'm so happy to turn it over to Blake, who is an expert in this. He started out in the New York Experience Center, and now you can see him down here anytime by appointment or at the local Plantation Experience Center. I'll turn it over to you.
Great. So today we're going to go through a CEU. It's called Living in a Material World. So we're going to be talking about some of our different shading fabrics, some of the properties of the fabrics, why we may use one fabric over another. Feel free to ask any questions, unmute yourself or type in the chat, and Deb can relay those to me. So I'm happy to get any of those answered. Kind of skip through to the beginning. So by the end of this presentation, we want you to be able to select roller shade fabrics, really understand what you're selecting as far as the color, the structure, what some of these fabric properties mean when you see values on the back of fabric samples. Definitely appropriate openness factors and opacities for different areas in residential spaces. Here in Florida, we have a lot of gorgeous views, so those openness factors become extremely important. And how to understand how the material is actually going to affect the interior finishes of the home. So any nice furniture, artwork, and how we can really use the right material to protect those items that we're putting in our clients' homes. So shades and automation. So when have you guys come across shades? And if you want to unmute yourself and jump in, you can. Have your clients been requesting shades? Are they requesting automation throughout the home and automation as far as the shades go? And my guess would be the answer to that question is yes, they are requesting it. And they have a lot of different reasons behind why they want shades and why they want automation. Maybe for the comfort and convenience in the room. It may be to protect those furnishings that they have inside the space. And it may be just the aesthetic value that they want to add to that room. Maybe it's the hardware and the brackets of the shade that they actually want to be exposed and be seen in the room. So there are a lot of different, yeah.
I was just going to interrupt and mention there are some really practical applications too for automated shades, just shades way high or even over a bathtub like a garden tub or something like that. Lots of practical automation reasons.
Exactly. So being able to conveniently control those shades in hard to reach spaces like a tall window or not having to climb over the bathtub to be able to pull the shade down. That shade probably isn't going to move most of the time if it wasn't automated. So here are some reasons why we're going to use shades in the home. So maybe we're trying to make the room more comfortable. We don't want it to be as hot when we're sitting and watching TV and lounging out in our space. So maybe we're trying to protect from heat as well as the UV damage, or make it more comfortable to sleep. People and our clients have all different sleep schedules. Some may sleep during the day. And they may want to be able to create that full blackout space at any time of the day. And we can do that with shades and some other materials as well. As well as privacy. Our clients especially are very private people and they expect privacy inside their home. There may be certain areas of the home where privacy is more important, such as a master bedroom or a master bathroom. And with those areas, we need to be very particular about the types of fabrics we're putting there. to make sure we're giving them the privacy that they're requesting. So some benefits of using automated shades. Scheduling, number one, having shades work for us. We don't need to go up to the window and pull the chain anymore. We notice the sun has dropped a little, some glare in our eyes as we're on our computer. We can scheduleize this and use daylight to optimize the way that these shades move throughout the day. Like Deb mentioned, tall, hard to reach windows. A lot of times those shades, if left manual, are never touched. We lose that visual real estate, I like to call it, of the view outside of the bathroom or the view outside of the master bedroom, because there are manual shades there and they're not used. But if we have automated shades, we can actually take advantage of that, take advantage of the views and the daylight. Silent motion as well, and keeping those shades in unison. So having our shades run electronically off a low voltage drive is going to keep them extremely quiet. And then having alignment. If you notice the picture on the left, you'll see that all of these shades they're still right now and they're in alignment of each other. That's something that we're looking for with automated shades. We don't want what I call pumpkin toothing and having them all come at different levels. We'd really like to have them move up and down seamlessly and in unison with each other, as well as when they're still, that they will stay in unison with each other. So no cords, beaded chains, pull chains. Those can be dangerous for small children and pets. So we want to get rid of those inside the home. And then as well as concealing the shades in pockets. So if we want to really have the shades disappear, we can create pockets in the space that the shades roll right up into, and leaves us with our beautiful solid glass windows that we see so many of here down in South Florida. We can have those shades disappear. Now, on the other hand, we do have clients that want to see the shades. And in this case, we have shades with beautiful hardware, gold finishes, brushed metals, whites, pearl whites, and blacks that can start to match the hardware and the mullions in that room. And by doing that, it can become an aesthetic piece in the space as well. I saw some questions coming in as I was talking about that. I believe it had to do with, are these shades in pockets here? Yes, if you notice the slit at the top here, if you can see my cursor, these shades are built into pockets and will completely disappear when they're rolled up to 100%. And then another question, so how would those be installed? This is something we do need to think about pre-construction. We need to know if these customers want the shades to disappear, they don't want a fascia, they don't want any roller visible. We need to know that ahead of time so we can start planning out the size and the spacing that we'll need in that pocket. Every window and roller shade is a little bit different. They roll up into different sizes depending on the length and width. So those are factors that we just need to know about ahead of time so we can plan out the correct construction of the space.
And Sonia, just to let you know, there are several ways to hide them. You can even put up a crown molding, or you can hide shades, or at least make them look like they blend in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of creative and different ways we can start to conceal these shades. And being in the industry, we've seen just about every different way that people have concealed them. But on top of the pockets, we also have fascia coverings that are fabric wrapped and metal. We also do exposed roller shades too. So you have a lot of different style and options for how that finished look is going to appear.
Well, the reason I was asking is because
yeah,
it's hard to install inside a pocket, and that's where I was going with that question.
Yep. Yeah, the installation does become a little bit more difficult in the pocket. And that's when we suggest having people, like Jeff and our shade installers out there on site working with the architect or the builder and making sure that those pockets are sufficient, not only to install the shade, but for the shade to sit up into and work properly. So some of the different control considerations of shades. You may have some of these around your home. Everyone nowadays just about has the Amazon Alexa, but I'll start on the left here with manual shades. So this is traditional. This is what we were growing up. could pull down from the bottom rail, or you had the beaded cord or the string cords on the right-hand side. But after a lot of studies, we've realized that most people don't touch the manual shades. They stay in the position they're in. There was a study done of a corporate building where 10% of manual shades were only moved once or less per day. So one time or not at all. So manual shades really are not used, which is going to eliminate some of those things that we might purchase that property for, such as visual real estate behind the home. Maybe the natural daylight that we get flowing into the home can be lost by that manual shade being down. Next, we could control these shades through a low voltage control system. So that low voltage control system can have keypads throughout the house, can have wireless remotes throughout the house. And we can do this seamlessly with a button press controlling your shades, maybe integrating other features such as your lights and your sound into different scenes as well. App and scheduling. So you will always have an app control with automated shades, giving you the ability to control them anywhere in the world. You have 100 points of control with this app, meaning you can adjust that shade to 100 different points on that window, which gives you a huge increase over the control of the sun as that natural light shines in. And scheduling. With scheduling, we can have these shades really work for us. If we know that morning sun is going to hit us at our breakfast table at 7:45 in the morning, we can have the shade dropping down at 7:40 to make sure that we're never going to get blasted by that sun ray. So schedules are a great option as well. And voice control is becoming huge right now with not touching things in the home and in offices and workspaces, being able to control the lights, the shades, and everything else from voice control is very effective, especially in a time like today. So almost 90% of our time is spent indoors. 80% of that time is actually inside of a residence or your home. And with that, we want to focus on the well-being of all that time being spent in your home. The wellness is a huge factor with our clients nowadays, whether it's their air conditioning, their water purification, and with that comes along natural light flowing inside the home. So by bringing in that natural light, there have been plenty of sleep studies that show that this is really going to help our different sleep patterns and sleep rhythms. And we need to harness that natural light as it comes into the space. We can do that with automated shades and scheduling and controls. We can really start to control the amount of light that's coming in and making sure that it's coming in at the right times, at the right angles, and really give us a form of control over that light. So assessing client needs. Client needs are different in every home and every client, but things I want you to look for as you're thinking about automated shades going inside a home. Number one would be the location. Which way is that window facing? Is there another building outside of that window that might be refracting sunlight back into the space? Here in Florida, is there an ocean behind the house that at sunset the light is going to bounce off of and come back into the window? We want to think about those things as we're designing the space because it's going to really change the openness factors, the colors, and all the different characteristics of fabrics that we want to go with. So by knowing the orientation, the surrounding conditions of the home, it'll really help us to better pick a fabric for the client. And aesthetics and performance of the fabric. So number one, we want the shade to look good, obviously, and match the interior. So we have plenty of different color options to match those wall colors, the couch material, the carpets, and matching the interior of the space. But we also may have some restrictions for the outside. Homeowners associations and some of these large condo buildings in Fort Lauderdale and Miami require us to have white on the outside, or even more recently, we're seeing a request for gray on the outside to match the window tint. And we can do that with different fabrics that have a dual side. We call that a twill fabric, and I'm going to go into the definition of that later on. But we have fabrics that face white on the outside or gray on the outside, so you can meet some of those different restrictions. The thermal performance really can be affected by the color on the outside of the shade. Definitely black versus white if we're thinking about wearing a t-shirt outside. We get very hot in a black t-shirt, but the white one is really refracting that sunlight and that heat away from us. So having a white on the outside can help. And acoustic performance. Acoustic performance, we want to think of two different ways, and we're gonna break these two ways up. But one would be the acoustic performance of the room and how things and sounds are bouncing off that room and bouncing off the shades and the walls, but also the acoustic performance of the shade and having an ultra quiet shade in some of these spaces, whether it be a baby's nursery or a theater room. We need to make sure that we have quiet shades and quiet fabrics. So client needs and comfort. So controlling their daylight levels. The glare control is going to be huge in movie and TV rooms, making sure we're not getting that sunlight glare off of the TV. And then preserving that visual real estate. They pay a lot of money to have the ocean view or the mountain view behind their home, and we don't want to go cutting that off with a room darkening fabric or a 1% openness factor. We want to make sure that we're preserving those views. So proper selection of fabric is going to be really important. And when the wrong fabric is selected, we're going to lose the benefits that we talked about, such as glare control, really controlling the heat as it comes in the room. And we want to use different factors of the fabric, like openness factor, color, composition, material, what it's made of, to really make the decision on how we want that shade to perform, how we want the fabric to perform in that light. So we'll go through some of the different fabric characteristics. Number one being openness factor. So openness factor is really going to be the percentage of holes that are in that fabric. So when we look at openness factors, we're going to see a standard is really a 0 to 10% in the window coverings industry. Sometimes it goes a little bit higher than 10%, whether the fabric can't be truly rated or whether it just is higher than 10% in a polyester fabric. But traditionally, we're at a 0 to 10%, a 0 being room darkening. And a lot of you might be confused on why I'm calling a 0% a room darkening and not a blackout fabric. Those are two words we need to be very careful of when we're talking to our clients. A blackout fabric is going to be a room darkening fabric built into side channels. That's going to give you a blackout shade. And I'll go into side channels and how we cut out that light. But this fabric being a 0%, it's not a blackout fabric, because if you hang that shade up, you're still going to have light gaps. You're still going to have light seeping in. Unless we go to the extreme of doing side channels and painting the different coves and things like that. But for now, I just want you to know that with a 0% fabric, it's room darkening until we take that next step to truly black out the space. From there, we go really from a 1, 3, a 5, and a 10%. Those are going to be your next 4 traditional fabric openness factors that you'll find when you're selecting shades. A 1% giving you very good privacy. A 3 and a 5 traditionally I would use in a living room or an open space. And a 10% I suggest if someone has a great view and you don't want to cut out their view. So those openness factors are really going to change the view that we have out of the space, but also the amount of light that's coming in, the amount of sun that's coming in as well. So we'll go into some different colors and how color of fabric is going to affect the actual perception or the view that we're going to have inside the space. So with light colored fabric, that white color is going to reduce the heat. It's going to refract it back outside as it hits the shade. So having a white backed fabric can really help us control that heat in the space. It's also going to create glare. So a white shade can actually create glare streaks. It can brighten the room almost like a light box. Because you're having that sun hit a white fabric, it actually ends up glowing. So it can contribute to that brightness in the space. If we're looking to darken a space like a TV room or like a movie room, we want to go with a darker colored fabric. A darker color is actually going to give a view as well. It's going to reduce the brightness, really tone down the amount of light that's coming into the space. But the only other factor is with a black shade to that heat. So you may have some heat absorption in the actual shade itself. So right here is actually our New York Experience Center. So what we did is we hung up shades starting on the left-hand side from a 10%, and then we're going to a 5%, a 3, and a 1%. This is a basket weave 27 fabric. So it's actually going to be dual-sided, meaning it's dark on the front, or on the right-hand picture, it's light on the front. And it's always going to be white on the back. So it's a twill fabric, meaning that it's dual-sided, 2 different colors of yarn in that fabric. But what you'll see is the difference in the same fabric, you have a completely different view and a completely different feel of the room. With the dark shades on the left, you can see great starting at the 10%, you can see the building behind. And even all the way down to the 1%, you still have a pretty decent view of that space. But if we go to the right, and look out those windows, you'll see starting on the left, you already have a pretty washed out view, and it gets worse and worse as we go to the right. So with that white shade, we're cutting out a lot of our view, but we're actually refracting out all that's coming in that space. Just to think about. And also the interior aesthetic of the space. So you'll see on the left is, with the dark shades, a lot more modern looking. And on the right, the white gives us a more traditional feel. So all these different factors are going to change the way we perceive the space when we're actually in it or when the client is using it.
Hey,
You know, I
Blake,
thought I'd mention, I was just
Yeah.
going to mention, I think
Please.
Jeff and his team they have samples of these, and they can show it to your clients anytime you want. It's great for them to actually see it, especially if they're asking for a lighter colored fabric, and you know it might be better for them to have a darker one.
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a good idea. We've taped some of them on the windows so that you can look through it and see what it looks like in your space. But Blake, I was going to ask, could you comment on what it looks like from the outside looking in with dark fabrics and light fabrics when there's more light on the inside than outside and more light on the outside than the inside?
Absolutely. And I'm going to get in and show a really good picture of that so you can see the view from the outside of the window. But I think really to explain what that is we have all these different factors in a space, and especially at nighttime, what it's going to look like from the outside. Whether that space is going to be lit up bright, whether there's going to be a lamp next to the window. Maybe there's landscape lighting that's going to be shining at the window. So there are a lot of different factors. And what it comes down to is actually getting samples of these fabrics, putting them on your client's windows, allowing them to see from the inside and the outside, and making the decision from there. Because as I'll get on in one of my later slides, I think privacy is very subjective depending on the client we're working with. But I'll get into it in more detail here in just a moment. So fabric weaves. We have a lot of different weave styles with fabrics, but the more traditional ones that we're going to find in window coverings are 3 styles: basket weave, twill, and knitted. Basket weave, you have all probably heard before. It's very popular when we're talking about a sheer fabric to use a basket weave. And really what this is it's polyester or fiberglass fabrics that are woven symmetrically together, either in 1x1 or 1x2 weaves. We can also do this with more of a decorative aesthetic to give you some texture in the fabric. We'll actually do a 1x2 weave. It's going to be very similar looking from afar, but when you're closer, you can see a little bit more texture. So if you're trying to add some decorative feel to the room, we may want to use those. And that would be a basket weave 27 fabric. With twill, this is going to be a coated polyester very similar to a basket weave. Actually, most of our twill fabrics are named basket weave. So don't let that confuse you. But what a twill fabric is we're using the same material. We're just weaving together multiple different types of yarn colors. So by weaving those yarn colors together, we can have a different color on the inside than we do on the outside. This helps, like I said, with the homeowners association restrictions, any building restrictions, also refracting that heat back outside by using a white or a metallized backing. Some of these twill fabrics we coat with an aluminum backing on the back, and that metal is going to refract the sun and the heat, lowering the heat gain and giving you a much better view. And then knitted. Knitted is going to be any of our more decorative fabrics. So anything that's more designer, you may see some hatch marks or floral patterns woven into these fabrics, but they're going to be decorative and soft and extremely delicate. These are going to be very delicate fabrics. If there are going to be kids playing in the home, if there's going to be, food fights at the family table, you may not want to go with a knitted fabric. A basket weave is much easier to clean, much easier to wipe down. It's that the fiberglass and polyester material. So to dive a little bit deeper into that with the basket weaves, you're going to see the grid here on the left with the weaves. This is a 2x2. But what this weave does is give us really good stability in the fabric. So why do we need stability? The fabric's just rolling down. We need stability for the larger windows. So when we get into those windows 8, 10 feet wide, we start to get what we call V's or waves in that fabric, where when it's hung up all the way across the room and we have the tight hem bar at the bottom pulling that tight, we may get some waves in the middle of the fabric. And that's an issue. And so sometimes when we have those larger windows, we can't use those other, the wrinkle-free knitted fabrics. But with the basket weaves, we can start to do some of those larger windows. So once again, the asymmetrical weaves, that's going to be our basket weave 27. It's just giving you more texture in the space, but primarily you're going to get the same benefits out of that fabric as far as the heat being refracted, as far as the openness factor is going to be very similar if you match them up side by side. But just that extra strand in there, the asymmetrical weave, is going to give us that texture added to the fabric. So twill. Twill is going to be very similar to the basket weave, the same material composition of the fabric, but we're just using 2 different colors. So we're weaving those in together, and the front and the back is going to have opposite colors. Usually I see this with a dark on the inside and a light on the outside. With this, you may have a diagonal diamond-shaped texture to the fabric, or primarily 90-degree weaves going straight across. It's going to be a very clean-cut fabric. And then knitted. The knitted are decorative fabrics. They're going to be extremely delicate. A lot of times you'll see knitted for really a kitchen window, a living room that wants soft treatment, really to make the space softer. It doesn't need to be as modern of a space. The knitted fabrics can help out with that. Also, if you're looking for patterns such as hatch marks, any floral patterns, we have a lot of different some stripes and things like that to add a more decorative feel to the space. We can use the knitted fabrics. So fabric composition, what are these made out of? What's in this yarn, and what is that material doing to keep these shades working properly? So fabric composition, as far as fiberglass core fabrics, these are going to be in our basket weaves. It's going to be very stable. It's going to maintain its shape. So we're not going to have that sagging, those V's. And with that, we make you use this fabric for tension shades and for skylights. The reason behind is in those skylights with that shade hanging parallel, we don't want that fabric dropping down. We want it to stay tight. And with that, we can do it with our fiberglass core fabrics. You're also going to see that they're inherently a little bit more heat and fire resistant than the polyester core fabrics. But with the polyester core, they're going to be more flexible. They can actually even recover a little bit better. So if you take a fiberglass fabric and you roll it up into a ball, it's going to maintain those creases and wrinkles, almost like a sheet of paper. But a polyester core fabric, you can think of more of like a t-shirt. If you roll up a t-shirt, you can lay it back out and get it pretty flat. Maybe you'll have a couple wrinkles in there that iron out easily. But that polyester core is more of a fabric-y material. It's going to be a lot less sustainable to heat, and I'll show you that here in a moment. So right here is actually in the Lutron manufacturing facility where we manufacture our shades, but we do a lot of testing on fabrics. And with fabrics, we want to know how hot can they get before they start to melt. And we test these fabrics at very, very extreme heats that you'll see here on the left. So for the fiberglass, which was what we said was an inherently stronger fabric, its melting point was at 2075 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you would never have that heat on a residential property, but we want to make sure that the fabrics over a 10-year, 15, 20-year time period are going to maintain and are going to not melt, or not going to crease, or not going to begin waving. And the polyester, you'll see its melting point was at 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you keep this shade in a skylight with direct sunlight for 5 years, you're probably going to have a good bit of wear and tear on that polyester fabric, which is why we don't allow you to do that. So we definitely suggest and push you to using fiberglass fabrics for that sort of shade. The fabric composition as well can change the view going outside. So you'll see with our fiberglass core fabrics, it's going to be a lot thinner of a strand of yarn. So with that thin strand of yarn, it's going to open up more holes in this fabric. So we have a 3% openness factor here on the left. You can see the letter M there pretty clearly. But when we use a 3% of the polyester core fabric on the right-hand side, you're going to see that M starts to disappear a little bit. It's just because there are less holes in that fabric. It's only got 266 openings as opposed to the 754. So this is why I say when you're looking at fabrics with your clients, you need to get samples and you need to hang them on their windows. Because you may be successful at explaining to your client, or I may be successful at explaining what a 3% openness factor is. However, when you put two different fabrics side by side, a 3% openness factor can be different based off the material and the color and the texture of that fabric. So it's really important to get samples and to hang these up and really see how that fabric is going to look. So when you need a shade for a window, that is, sorry, I'm getting my question blocked off here by the video chat. When you need a shade for a window that's very large, what fabric composition might you look for? Feel free to jump in if anybody wants to answer, and if not, I will go ahead and answer it for you. But when you need a shade for a window that is very large, what fabric composition might you look for? All right, I'm just going to keep jumping ahead and go here. So when we're looking for this, we would be looking for a fiberglass core fabric. That fiberglass core is going to be a lot stronger, more suitable for those large shades, and it's going to perform better for that large window, cut out some of those waves and V's, and make sure that we get a flat, really nice fabric going up and down that window. So acoustic performance. Now we're going to go into the two factors of acoustic performance that we talked about earlier. So with acoustic performance, we start to get a lot of different ratings, and these ratings are portrayed in our fabric binders and we come across them, but we really need to know what they actually mean so we can select the correct fabric. So we want to consider important is the NRC, or the noise reduction coefficient. So with that, a 1 means that the fabric absorbs all sound. You're not going to find that in a lot of roller shades. I don't believe any of our fabrics are at a true 1, but anything greater than a 0.5 is going to have a noticeable effect in the space. So thickness and density is going to affect that sound absorption, but also openness factor. So the reason I say that is with thickness and density, you may think, okay, well, a blackout shade is going to dampen all that noise, but really with a blackout shade being a 0% openness factor, it's going to start to reflect and bounce that noise throughout the space. So that's not our best option. Our best option is going to be something that does have a little bit of openness to the fabric. It's going to allow the sound to be absorbed through the fabric rather than bounced off of it. Openness factor comes in. But when we're thinking about soundproofing a space, We don't want to think that the shade is going to be the soundproofer, that the shade is what's going to do it. If we're really looking to cut out the ambulance driving behind the building at nighttime, if we're trying to cut out the street noise, we really want to start looking at things like drapes, heavier drapes that are going to start to reduce that noise, or other soundproofing measures in the room, not as much of the solar shade. So the acoustic performance of the fabric material can also make a huge difference in the space as well. You'll see pictured here is a child's nursery. Having automated shades in a child's nursery sounds great, but if they wake the baby up from the nap at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, the parents may be calling you to rip the shades out of the room. So we want to make sure that we're selecting the correct fabric that's going to give us that ultra quiet performance inside that nursery, or maybe inside of that home theater where you're watching movies. So with that, we have blackout fabrics that are coated on the back. They have what we call a flocked backing. So we take a traditional blackout fabric, we spray an adhesive on the back, and we stand a couple feet away with a machine, and we actually spray cotton fibers at the back of this fabric. What that's going to do is it's going to muffle the sound as that shade rolls up on the roller. With our other fabrics, if we're not using this flocked backing, static electricity can build up in those shades. And as that blackout shade comes down, you may hear some of that crackling from the static electricity. We wouldn't want that in the nursery or in the theater room. So using a flocked back fabric can really help us quiet down these spaces. And we have a lot of flocked back fabrics to choose from. So which openness factor is likely to have the highest NRC value? So here, which one, whether it's a blackout, a 1%, a 10%, is going to have the highest NRC value, so the best acoustical rating. And with that, it's going to be a 1%. So 1% fabric is going to have the best because it's allowing that sound to travel through the fabric, unlike the blackout, but it's also tight enough to kind of keep and absorb some of that sound in. The 10% may be too much of an openness factor, allowing the sound to bounce back and come through off the window. So really a 1% is going to be our best bet. So heat and UV protection. This is extremely important for any interior designers who are on the call right now. I know you put a lot of time and effort into choosing what materials are going inside a space, whether it be the fabric on the couch, the wallpaper, whether it be the flooring. All of that takes a lot of time, and it costs our clients a lot of money. We want to make sure that we don't put those beautiful materials into a space and have them ruined by the heat and the UV coming in. So with this, we can use shades, and we really need to understand what is heat and what is UV, because they're not the same, meaning we can sit next to a fire pit and not get sunburned, or we can go skiing in Vail and we can leave that ski trip with an incredible sunburn, even though we were freezing cold the whole time. So heat and UV are two very different things. So what do we want to block, whether it's UV or heat or both? So we want to protect these flooring and finishings from the sun, but also the openness factor and the weave are all going to play into that UV solar transmittance. We call it the TS value. So we're looking for a low TS value to block the UV light. And we'll go through some fabrics with a low TS value. So solar metrics here, these are going to be what's happening when the sun is coming into our space and it's shining in. So you'll see starting on the left, we have, and if I get my pointer here, we have our sun, which is the solar energy shining that light in through our window. And what sun and UV is coming through this window is going to be our solar transmittance, or our TS value. So the amount of heat and UV that are actually coming into that space. But with fabrics, we also have an AS value, which is going to be the heat absorbed by the fabric, the solar absorption. So how much of that heat is actually making its way past that fabric and into the space, we want to cut that out. We can do that by using a light colored fabric, or a dark colored fabric is actually going to absorb more of that heat into the space. And then we have the solar reflectance. So the solar reflectance is going to be what's rebounded or refracted back outside of the window. The best solar reflectance we're going to get is going to be from white-backed fabrics or the aluminum-backed fabrics that I talked about earlier. We have some aluminum silver-backed fabrics that are really going to refract that heat and sun back out of the space. So with metrics here, we really want to prevent the heat gain. And we'll see some of the things we're going to look for when we're trying to prevent heat gain. We want to go with our white-backed fabrics or the metallized fabrics to refract heat outside. We want to look for a high RS value, the solar reflectance. If we don't want into a high solar reflectance to reflect that sun back out of the space. Preventing UV damage, darker fabrics. To absorb that UV from passing into the room. So we need a dark fabric on the window so that sun and that UV light can be absorbed before it hits that bright red couch in the living room. We also need to use lower openness factors to cut out more of that light. We discussed with the openness factor, it's really just the percentage of holes that are going to be on that fabric. So if we're working with a 1% openness factor, we have less holes for that sun, those UV rays to travel into the room with. But if we have a 10% openness factor, we have a lot more holes for that light to travel into the room. So what fabric properties should you look for in a space with valuable artwork? So we're going to have very nice artwork hanging on the wall. We don't want that artwork to be faded out. We don't want those colors to begin to disappear or maybe to begin to wrinkle. So with that, we're going to be looking for either fabric, whether it's dark colored fabrics or with a lower openness factor. We're looking for both of those characteristics in the fabric to protect that artwork. The lower openness factor is going to mean less holes, less UV rays coming through. And the dark colored fabric is going to really absorb that UV light and that heat as it comes into the space. What fabric composition might be a good choice for a facade with gorgeous views, facade with gorgeous views of the ocean and lots of direct sunlight? So we're going to have gorgeous views, which we see all the time down here, views of the ocean, and lots of direct sunlight, which we get all the time down here as well. And with that, we're going to be looking for a twill weave fabric. Remember, the twill weave was the dual color, meaning we can have an interior color to match the design, the aesthetic of the space, but we can have the white on the back to refract that sunlight and that heat as it's coming in. So it's going to preserve that beautiful, gorgeous view, but it's also going to protect us from that sunlight. They didn't specify an openness factor here, but if I have a gorgeous ocean view, but tons of direct sunlight, you're going to have to compensate a little bit. I would say you're probably going to go with a 5% openness factor, potentially a 10, but the reason I go with 5 is to cut out some more of that direct sunlight. It just may be too much sunlight if you go with a 10%. Humid environments. So what do we do if we come across a shade that needs to be in a bathroom, somewhere where there may be water present? We have pool rooms here in Florida. So damp environments, they often do require privacy, whether it be the pool shower, coming right off the back deck. We may need to give us privacy in a heavily trafficked area, but that area may also get wet. And with this, we want to choose a fabric that's antimicrobial. So we're not going to get that mold, mildew building up, no smells to the fabric. And if we use one of those 100% fiberglass composition fabrics, they're essentially waterproof. They're easy to clean. You can wipe them down. They dry very nicely. So we do have fabrics that you can use inside of those bathrooms, inside of those pool rooms, maybe behind the bathtub where you can't reach. We have fabrics for that. Privacy. So privacy, I like to say, is very subjective. And when I say that, I relate it to Facebook. And the reason I do is because we all have a Facebook and we have friends on Facebook, but we have all different types of friends. Some of those friends have no problem posting pictures of their newborn baby, sometimes even inside the hospital room. They post pictures of every holiday and every family gathering inside their home. They may post pictures inside their bedrooms. And they have no problem doing that. It's normal to them. It's a part of their life. But then we have people on Facebook who don't even want us posting happy birthday because they don't want anyone knowing it's their birthday. They're very private people. They don't want you posting pictures of them on their Facebook wall. They're just there for a means of information. So everyone has a different view of privacy. It's a very subjective term. And with that, we need to allow our clients to choose how private they want to be. And we can do that by giving them samples of these fabrics. So you'll see here, I'm going to show you why privacy is subjective. So starting on the left, we have what I will say is a man standing right behind the window. But things you need to notice is there is no exterior lighting on this house. The lights on the inside are at full bright 100%, and there's a man standing less than a foot from the window. So you can see him light and bright whether there's a shade there or not. And as he begins to back up a foot from the shade, 2 feet from the shade, he begins to disappear. Now, to me, I may think that picture number 1 on the far left is private enough for me because I can't see his face. I can't see what he's wearing. I have no idea what he's dressed in, if he has a hat on, anything like that. But as we go to the right, that may be the level of privacy that somebody is looking for, where they can't see anyone. There's no shadow, there's no glare, there's no understanding that there's even a person in that room. So we need to let the clients make this decision. They need to see the fabrics on these windows or on windows in general and see how they perform and see the amount of privacy that they'll receive from the fabrics.
And Jeff and his team may be able to help you also to light those. Because if you light it real close to the window, you can't see much of what's going on inside. Again, if you light it from the outside, there's also some reflectance, so you can't see inside. So Jeff and his team can help you with that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I'll touch on again a little bit more is there are many ways we can provide clients privacy inside the home. And it's not always the shade fabric that's going to do it. Because your client may decide they're not willing to sacrifice that view. They're not willing to sacrifice that natural light. So how else can we give them privacy? And Jeff can do that with things like exterior lighting is a huge factor for privacy at nighttime. We can use exterior lighting to give you more privacy, to give you less privacy if you'd like the windows to be showing. So there are a bunch of different other factors inside a space, as well on the interior. If there's a lamp right window, or if the lighting is 15 feet away from the window, it's going to make a huge difference. And we can design those things from the perspective of privacy if we're doing it early enough. We mentioned earlier, I mentioned earlier, the difference between privacy and room darkening fabrics. Well, a privacy fabric is going to be translucent. So a translucent is going to be less than 1%, not quite 0%. It's going to be less than 1, meaning it's going to distort any view you have of that space. And it's also going to allow light to come into the space. So it might give you that exceptional privacy you're looking for while allowing you to have some still natural light flowing in without anybody being able to see in. The room darkening application is when we would use a 0% openness factor. Keep in mind, this isn't a blackout because it's not built into side channels. You'll see on the right-hand side how there are light gaps in between the shades, and on the left-hand side of the shade, the right-hand side, and even under it on the sill a little bit as well. But we can use those room darkening applications to give you privacy. Now, where would you want to use these? Well, in a main living room, a room darkening fabric to give you privacy probably isn't optimal. You don't want to be putting walls in the living room in front of that beautiful view that they have. But using a translucent fabric, something that has just a slight bit of openness, can allow that sun to come in. You can even see the shadows of the trees on the fabric, which makes you feel like you still have that natural space coming inside your home. And it can be a big benefit in the actual feel, design, and aesthetic of the room. So complete blackout application. So if we're really looking for that solid black space, our client is very annoyed by light coming in, whether they're sleeping or whether they're watching TV. We all have those clients where one speck of light and it's over with. They are not happy. So we have different ways we can give you that complete blackout feel. Number one would be using a 0% openness fabric. So we would use a room darkening 0% openness that's going to cut out all light. 0% openness fabric is actually two fabrics glued together. We're going to have a felt piece on the back, which is going to give us even more privacy or protection from any light bleeding through. Then we can use side channels. So side channels you'll see pictured here are going to be a metal piece that we can either install inside the wall or we can do on the exterior of the wall. They come in white and black but can be painted, and the shade will actually run through that side channel, making sure that we have no light gaps like you see on this picture here, where the shades are a 0% openness factor, but they have direct daylight coming through. With a side channel, we can eliminate all of that daylight flowing through the space. And they also have a little felt here that's going to eliminate the sunlight coming in even more, as well as protecting that shade as it slides up and down through the channel. Another thing we can do is actually paint the interior of the pocket. So we mentioned those pocket spaces earlier. We can get into those pre-construction or after construction. We can actually paint those before we install the shades. We can paint them a matte black, which is going to dilute a lot of that light as it comes in. And then a hem bar. We can use the hem bar. If you notice, I'm going to keep flipping back to this picture. The sill here, while we're using these, even if we were to put side channels to block out this light, on this window sill here, we have a slight gap, and that's allowing light to bleed into the space. So we can use a hem bar with a wool pile or a sill angle as well that the hem bar sits into, that's going to eliminate that light coming from the bottom. So we can achieve 100% true blackout with these shades.